the Arizona sun hammered down on Fort Benning's training grounds like molten steel, turning the sand into a furnace that radiated waves of heat so intense they seemed to dance like liquid fire. Emma Reynolds lay sprawled in the dirt, her mouth filled with the metallic taste of blood, mixed with grit as crimson drops from her split lips stained the dusty ground beneath her. Above her, Sergeant Major Thomas Blackwell's imposing shadow blocked out the merciless sun, his combat boot positioned for another devastating kick. At 6 feet 4 inches tall with shoulders that strained against his tactical vest, Blackwell looked like he'd been carved from granite specifically for military recruitment posters. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Get up, Reynolds, he barked, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had never been told no in his entire privileged life. We're not finished with your weapons assessment yet. The circle of soldiers surrounding them erupted in cruel laughter, their voices echoing off the concrete walls of the armory like a pack of hyenas closing in on wounded prey. Emma could hear Staff Sergeant Peterson's high-pitched snicker mixing with the deeper guffaws of male soldiers. Even some of the second-year specialists had abandoned their own exercises to witness the daily humiliation of Bravo Company's most pathetic failure. Maybe she needs a different kind of assignment, called out Corporal Mitchell, a stocky soldier from Texas whose father held some high-ranking Pentagon position that afforded his son unlimited arrogance. I hear there's a nice desk job at the recruitment office. Lots of paperwork and phone calls. More laughter rippled through the crowd as Emma pushed herself up on her elbows, her ribs screaming in protest where Blackwell's boot had connected with surgical precision. She was impossibly small compared to these specimens of military breeding. Barely 5 feet 3 inches and maybe 115 pounds soaking wet. Next to these genetically gifted future officers, she looked like a child playing dress-up in oversized fatigues. "Come on, princess," Blackwell sneered, reaching down to grab her by the collar of her uniform. "Show us those weapon assembly skills they supposedly taught you in. Where was it again? Some community college ROTC program?" As his hand closed around her collar, Emma's body responded with muscle memory that ran deeper than conscious thought. Her right hand twitched toward his wrist, fingers automatically positioning for a grip that would shatter the small bones there. Her left hand started to rise toward the pressure point just below his ear, a strike that would drop him unconscious in seconds. For just one moment, her eyes went completely flat and cold, displaying the dead stare of someone who had killed before and would kill again without the slightest hesitation. Then she caught herself. Emma forced her hands to remain limp, made herself whimper pathetically as Blackwell hauled her to her feet. She stumbled deliberately, playing up the weakness even as every trained instinct screamed at her to end this humiliation with swift, brutal violence. "Pathetic," Blackwell muttered, shoving her backward with enough force to send her tumbling. Emma let herself fall again, landing hard on her tailbone while suppressing the combat reflexes that could have turned the fall into a tactical roll. "I don't know what strings your daddy pulled to get you into special weapons training, but this isn't some participation trophy summer camp. This is where we forge the next generation of America's elite marksmen and armorers." He gestured grandly to the assembled soldiers, most of whom nodded along with his speech like disciples receiving wisdom from their prophet. These weren't ordinary trainees. Special Weapons Division only accepted the absolute best of the best, the children of generals and senators, the future leaders of America's armed forces. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma had memorized all their files during her preparation for this mission. Sergeant Major Thomas Blackwell, son of General William Blackwell, decorated veteran of 3 wars and current Joint Chiefs Advisor. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Peterson, daughter of Admiral James Peterson, current head of Naval Intelligence Operations. Corporal Ryan Mitchell, whose father controlled half the defense contracts in the Southwest through his position at the Pentagon. And then there was Emma Reynolds, supposedly the daughter of a small-town sheriff from Oregon here on some kind of diversity scholarship that nobody could quite explain or verify. "You know what I think?" Blackwell continued, circling her like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. "I think you're a mistake, a clerical error. Someone in admissions probably mixed up your file with someone who actually deserves to be here. Emma kept her eyes downcast, playing the role of the defeated victim, but she was cataloging everything with the precision of a trained operative. The way Blackwell favored his left leg, old combat injury, probably from his tour in Syria. The slight tremor in Peterson's hands that suggested stimulant abuse to maintain her perfect marksmanship scores. The expensive watch on Mitchell's wrist that was way beyond any soldier's budget, indicating financial support that raised questions about loyalty. Details that might matter later when her real mission began in earnest. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Master Sergeant Rodriguez watching from the shade of the equipment shed. Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, former Army Ranger with 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. His dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Emma's skin crawl. Unlike the other instructors who seemed content to let the soldiers police themselves through this brutal hierarchy, Rodriguez was studying her, analyzing her every movement. That level of scrutiny was dangerous for someone trying to maintain deep cover. "Maybe we should help her pack," suggested Peterson, her voice dripping with false sweetness that barely concealed the cruelty underneath. "I'm sure there's a nice desk job somewhere that would be perfect for someone with her limited skill set." The laughter started again, but Emma noticed that not everyone was joining in with the same enthusiasm. Private First Class Martinez, her assigned bunkmate, stood at the edge of the crowd with a troubled expression clouding her features. A few of the other soldiers looked genuinely uncomfortable with the level of cruelty on display. Good. She could work with that kind of decency when the time came. Emma slowly pushed herself to her feet, making sure to wince and favor her left side where she'd taken the hardest hits. She wiped the blood from her lip with the back of her hand, leaving a red smear across her pale skin that would serve as visible evidence of the abuse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the desert wind that carried the scent of sage and diesel fuel from the motor pool. "I'll try harder tomorrow." Blackwell laughed, a sound like breaking glass that sent chills down the spines of even the most hardened soldiers. "Tomorrow? Sweetheart, if you can't handle basic weapons assembly, what makes you think you'll survive advanced armor qualification or ballistic testing or the Barrett field stripping exam?" Emma met his eyes for just a moment, and something flickered there. A flash of something dark and dangerous that made Blackwell take an involuntary step backward. But then it was gone, replaced by the watery, defeated look of someone who was clearly in over her head. "I just thought. I want to serve my country," she said, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. The soldiers exchanged glances, some rolling their eyes at what they perceived as pathetic desperation, but Master Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward, his boots crunching on the sand with military precision. "All right, show's over," he called out, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Blackwell, Peterson, Mitchell, you've got weapons maintenance duty. The rest of you hit the showers. Mess hall opens in 30 minutes. As the crowd dispersed, Rodriguez approached Emma with deliberate slowness. She kept her head down, playing the part of the humiliated victim, but she could feel his eyes boring into her like laser beams. "Reynolds," he said quietly, using her cover surname. "A word." Emma's pulse quickened, but she nodded meekly. "Yes, sir." Rodriguez waited until the other soldiers were completely out of earshot before speaking again, his weathered face unreadable as carved stone. "That was quite a fall you took there." "I'm sorry, sir. I know I need to work on my balance." "Balance?" Rodriguez repeated the word slowly, like he was tasting something bitter. "Funny thing about balance, Reynolds. Most people, when they fall, they put their hands out to catch themselves. Natural reflex. But you fell like someone who's been trained to take a hit, like someone who knows how to distribute impact to minimize damage." Emma's blood turned to ice water in her veins, but she kept her expression completely blank. "I don't understand, sir." Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Maybe not. But I'll be watching you, Reynolds. Something tells me there's more to you than meets the eye." As he walked away, Emma allowed herself a small, satisfied smile hidden from view. Let him watch. By the time he figured out what he was really looking at, it would be far too late for him or anyone else involved in this conspiracy. The game had officially begun, and Emma Reynolds was about to remind everyone why Ghost Protocol operatives were the most feared soldiers in the world. 3 weeks had passed since Emma's humiliating introduction to Special Weapons Division, and her reputation as the division's most spectacular failure had only solidified into something approaching legend among the soldiers. During morning physical training, she consistently finished dead last in every run, her small frame apparently unable to keep pace with the genetically gifted specimens around her. In weapons training, she fumbled with rifle assembly so badly that instructor Kim had to demonstrate the same basic procedure 4 separate times. During tactical simulations, she made rookie mistakes that got her entire team killed within minutes of mission start. Reynolds did it again, Peterson whispered loudly during breakfast, making absolutely sure her voice carried across the mess hall like a dinner bell announcing fresh gossip. I heard she actually cried during yesterday's Barrett assembly test. Actually cried, like, tears and everything. The table erupted in snickers and barely suppressed laughter. Emma sat alone at the far end of the hall, mechanically spooning oatmeal into her mouth while staring at her tray with the defeated posture of someone barely hanging on to their last thread of hope. Her shoulders were hunched in defeat, her uniform wrinkled and slightly too large for her frame. To anyone watching, she looked like someone who would wash out within days. What they couldn't see was the micro camera hidden in her collar button, recording every conversation within a 30-foot radius. They had no idea that her clumsy stumble near the officer's table yesterday had allowed her to plant a listening device under their usual seats. And they certainly didn't know that her pathetic performance in armory inventory had given her unsupervised access to the weapons vault for nearly 20 minutes at a time. I actually feel bad for her, Martinez said quietly, glancing over at Emma's isolated table with genuine concern in her voice. Martinez was Emma's bunkmate, a genuinely kind girl from New Mexico whose father was a decorated Marine colonel. Maybe we should, don't, Blackwell cut her off sharply, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The weak don't survive here, Martinez. The sooner Reynolds learns that harsh reality, the better it'll be for everyone involved. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Besides, I heard from a very reliable source that she's not even supposed to be here. Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. This was new information, potentially valuable intelligence that hadn't appeared in any of her briefing materials. What do you mean? Mitchell asked, leaning forward with the eager expression of someone who lived for military gossip. Blackwell glanced around dramatically, ensuring he had everyone's complete attention before continuing in a stage whisper. My father knows someone high up in personnel. Apparently, Reynolds' file just appeared overnight about a month before the training cycle started. No prior military academy applications, no family military history, no marksmanship achievements worth mentioning. Just poof. Suddenly, she's accepted to the most elite weapons division in the entire country. That's impossible, Peterson protested, her voice rising with indignation. The waiting list for special weapons is 2 years long minimum. My father had to call in multiple favors just to get me considered for admission. Exactly my point, Blackwell replied, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction at having insider knowledge. Which means either someone very powerful wanted her here, or someone made a very expensive mistake that's about to be corrected. Emma filed this information away while maintaining her dejected posture. Her insertion into Special Weapons Division had been handled by Ghost Protocol's best forgers and hackers, professionals who could rewrite reality itself when necessary. But apparently, their work hadn't been quite perfect enough to fool everyone who mattered. That was definitely concerning and would need to be reported to her handlers immediately. The conversation was interrupted by the sharp blast of the morning assembly whistle. Soldiers began filing out of the mess hall toward the parade grounds for their daily inspection and briefing, but Emma deliberately lagged behind, pretending to struggle with organizing her tray and personal items. As the hall emptied of witnesses, she made her move with practiced precision. The kitchen staff was busy preparing for lunch service, giving Emma a clear path to the service corridors that ran beneath the main building like a hidden circulatory system. She had memorized the division's blueprints during her mission preparation, including the sections that weren't included on any official architectural plans. Special Weapons Division had been built on the site of a Cold War-era research facility, and some of the old infrastructure remained intact, providing perfect routes for someone who needed to move unseen. Moving with practiced silence that came from years of specialized training, Emma slipped through a maintenance door and into the tunnel system. Here, away from cameras and witnesses, her entire demeanor changed instantly. The hunched shoulders straightened into perfect military posture. The uncertain gait became fluid and predatory. The lost little girl vanished completely, replaced by something far more dangerous. She had exactly 43 minutes before her absence would be noticed and reported. Emma's first destination was the administration building's sub-basement. The main server room hummed behind reinforced doors. The security here was military-grade. Biometric scanners, motion detectors, pressure-sensitive floors, designed to detect even the slightest unauthorized presence. For a normal intruder, penetration would be absolutely impossible. Emma wasn't normal by any definition of the word. She produced a small device from a hidden pocket in her uniform, a piece of technology that officially didn't exist in any government inventory. The biometric scanner read her fingerprints as belonging to Colonel Elizabeth Hawthorne, the division's head of information systems. The device had cost Ghost Protocol 3 months of surveillance and a carefully orchestrated accident that had allowed them to lift Hawthorne's prints from her coffee cup. Inside the server room, Emma worked with mechanical precision. She wasn't here to steal data that would leave traces that could be detected during routine security sweeps. Instead, she was installing monitoring software that would piggyback on the division's own systems, completely invisible to standard detection protocols. Every email, every file transfer, every database query would now be automatically copied to a secure server farm in Virginia. 28 minutes remaining. Her next target was Colonel Harrison's office, 3 floors up and protected by an entirely different set of security measures. Emma moved through the building's ventilation system like a ghost, her small size allowing her to navigate spaces that would be impossible for larger operatives. She had performed this kind of infiltration dozens of times before in places far more dangerous than a military training facility. Harrison's office was a treasure trove of classified information. Personnel files, training schedules, communication logs with Pentagon officials. Emma photographed everything with a camera no bigger than a shirt button, her movements economical and absolutely silent. But it was what she discovered in Harrison's personal safe that made her blood run cold: financial records, bank transfers, payments to offshore accounts that had no legitimate explanation whatsoever. Colonel Harrison, the decorated war hero and division commander, was selling secrets to someone. But to whom? And more importantly, how deep did this corruption run through the division's command structure? 15 minutes remaining. Emma was preparing to extract when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy boots moving with military precision. She froze, listening intently to the pattern. 2 people, both male based on stride length and weight distribution. One was definitely Harrison. She had memorized his distinctive gait during her first week of observation. The other footsteps were unfamiliar but equally purposeful. "We can't afford any more delays," Harrison was saying as they approached his office, his voice tight with stress. "The buyers are getting impatient, and impatient buyers tend to make dangerous decisions." "The merchandise is delicate," replied the second voice, which Emma now recognized as belonging to Master Sergeant Rodriguez. "One mistake and we lose everything, including our heads." Emma's mind raced with implications. Rodriguez was involved, too. The conspiracy was deeper than she had initially suspected. How many others were compromised? How far up did the corruption reach? The door handle turned. Emma had perhaps 3 seconds before they entered the office and discovered her presence. A normal person would be trapped, caught red-handed with classified documents spread across the desk. But Emma had been trained by the most elite operatives in the world. She moved like liquid shadow, flowing silently across the room and up the wall to a position above the door frame, her body pressed against the ceiling tiles, weight distributed across multiple support beams to avoid triggering any pressure sensors. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate to minimize even the slightest sound. Harrison and Rodriguez entered below her, completely unaware of the predator hanging mere inches above their heads, listening to every word they spoke. "The Reynolds girl is becoming a significant problem," Rodriguez said, settling into a chair across from Harrison's desk with obvious familiarity. "She's not what she appears to be. Her reactions are all wrong." Emma's blood turned to ice as she realized they were discussing her specifically. "What do you mean?" Harrison asked, moving to his safe with practiced ease. "Her failures are too perfect, too calculated. And today, during weapons training, I saw something that bothered me considerably." Rodriguez leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "When Blackwell grabbed her, she started to move into a defensive position I've only seen described in classified Special Forces manuals. Then she caught herself and played the victim." Harrison paused, his hand frozen on the safe door. "You think she's military intelligence?" "I think she's something much worse than standard military intelligence," Rodriguez replied grimly. "The way she moves when she thinks no one is watching. I've seen that kind of training before. Black operations, deep cover specialists, elite assassination units." His voice dropped even further. "What if she's here investigating us specifically?" The two men stared at each other for a long tension-filled moment. Finally, Harrison spoke with deadly calm. "Then we eliminate the problem tonight. Permanently." Emma remained perfectly still as they discussed the specific details of her planned murder. They would make it look like an accident, a training mishap perhaps, or a suicide brought on by the overwhelming stress of military life. Rodriguez knew the perfect location, an abandoned section of the obstacle course where accident victims had been discovered before. After they left, Emma dropped silently to the floor, her mind already shifting into combat mode. Her cover was blown, but she had learned something invaluable in return. The corruption at Special Weapons Division wasn't just about selling military secrets to foreign governments. It was about selling something they called merchandise, something delicate and valuable enough to kill for without hesitation. She had to get word to her handlers immediately. But first, she had to survive the night and the professional killers who would be hunting her. As Emma slipped back through the ventilation system, she allowed herself a cold, predatory smile. Harrison and Rodriguez thought they were hunting a frightened little girl who had stumbled into something beyond her understanding. They had no idea. They had just declared war on a ghost who specialized in making people disappear forever. The abandoned east wing of Fort Benning stood like a monument to forgotten wars, its concrete walls scarred by decades of desert wind and institutional neglect. Built during the height of the Cold War as a fallout shelter and classified research facility, it had been officially sealed off after a structural collapse in the 1990s that killed 2 maintenance workers. Officially, it was off-limits to all personnel without specific authorization. Unofficially, it was the perfect place to dispose of problems that required permanent solutions. Emma moved through the darkened corridors at 11:47 p.m. Her military-grade night vision goggles turned the pitch-black maze into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and deadly angles. She had been here for nearly 20 minutes, setting her trap with the methodical precision of someone who had orchestrated similar scenarios dozens of times before. Pressure plates hidden under loose floorboards. Trip wires connected to military-grade flashbang grenades. A dozen different ways to kill or incapacitate anyone foolish enough to come hunting for her in this concrete tomb. But as she crouched behind a collapsed section of wall, checking her watch for the 3rd time in 2 minutes, Emma knew something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. Harrison and Rodriguez should have arrived by now, according to the timeline she had overheard. Their plan had been brutally simple: lure her here with a fake emergency message supposedly from Martinez, then stage a tragic accident in the structurally unstable building. Clean, untraceable, tragic. Instead, she heard footsteps approaching from 3 different directions simultaneously. Emma's blood chilled as she recognized the tactical formation. This wasn't a simple murder carried out by 2 corrupt officials. This was a coordinated military operation being executed by trained professionals. Through her encrypted earpiece, she could hear whispered communications between at least 6 different operators moving through the building with textbook precision. Viper 1 in position, north corridor secured. Viper 2, east stairwell clear. No contacts. Viper 3, basement access point confirmed. Clear. These weren't instructors playing at being soldiers. These were real operators, special forces professionals with combat experience and advanced training. Emma pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the pieces of a much larger puzzle fell into place with terrifying clarity. The merchandise that Harrison and Rodriguez had discussed wasn't classified information or stolen military technology. It was people. Specifically, it was her. Somehow, someone with significant resources and intelligence capabilities had figured out that a Ghost Protocol operative was embedded at Special Weapons Division, and they had set an elaborate trap that went far beyond the capabilities of 2 corrupt officials. Target should be in the central chamber based on our intelligence, came Rodriguez's voice through her intercepted communications. Remember, we need her alive and functional. The buyers want to know everything she knows about Ghost Protocol operations before we dispose of her. Emma's jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. Ghost Protocol's existence was the most closely guarded secret in the American military establishment. If foreign intelligence agencies had discovered the identity of one of their operatives, they wouldn't simply kill her quickly. They would torture every piece of classified intelligence out of her first. The locations of safe houses, the identities of other operatives, the details of ongoing missions around the globe. Thousands of American lives hung in the balance, and she was the key that could unlock all of it. She had to escape this trap immediately and get word to her handlers. Every second she remained here increased the danger to her fellow operatives. Emma began moving toward the south exit, the one route that appeared clear of hostile forces according to her surveillance. But as she rounded a corner with practiced stealth, she found herself face to face with Sergeant Major Blackwell. Except this wasn't the arrogant bully who had been tormenting her for weeks. Blackwell held a military-grade assault rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had used similar weapons in actual combat situations. His expensive watch, the one that had seemed out of place for a soldier's budget, suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't purchased with Daddy's money, it was payment for services rendered to foreign handlers. The Division Star Soldier was a foreign intelligence asset, probably embedded for years. "Hello, Emma," Blackwell said softly, his weapon trained on her center mass with professional competence. Or should I say Lieutenant Reynolds of Ghost Protocol. Emma kept her hands clearly visible, her posture non-threatening, despite every combat instinct screaming at her to strike first and ask questions later. "I don't know what you're talking about, Blackwell." Blackwell laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only cold professionalism. The helpless little girl act was genuinely impressive. "I'll give you that much credit. You had me completely fooled for weeks. But my handlers are extremely thorough professionals. They've been tracking Ghost Protocol operations for years, waiting patiently for an opportunity exactly like this one." "Your handlers?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. "Chinese Ministry of State Security," Blackwell replied with obvious pride. "I've been embedded here since I was 18 years old, building my cover identity, establishing my reputation, waiting for something truly valuable to fall into my lap." His smile was predatory and cold. "Imagine my surprise when one of America's most classified operatives walked right through the front gates of my division." Emma's mind raced through tactical options with computer-like efficiency. The corridor was narrow, giving her extremely limited room to maneuver. Blackwell was positioned perfectly with clear lines of fire and multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated. He had been trained well by professionals who understood exactly what they were dealing with. But he was making one critical mistake. He was talking instead of shooting. "How did you figure it out?" Emma asked, taking a small step forward that would appear to be nervous fidgeting to an untrained observer. In reality, she was positioning herself for a potential strike. "Your weapons handling last week was the final piece of evidence we needed," Blackwell replied, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph. Those mistakes you made don't exist in any standard military training manual. My handlers ran the footage through their extensive databases and got a positive match, techniques used by a Ghost Protocol operative in Syria 3 years ago. Blackwell's eyes glittered with satisfaction and barely contained excitement. An operative who was supposedly killed in action, according to all official records. Except here you are, very much alive and playing dress-up at a military division. Another step. Emma was now within striking distance, but she needed him distracted for just a few more seconds. "So, what's the plan now?" she asked. "Torture you for classified information, eventually." "Yes," Blackwell admitted with disturbing casualness. They had just declared war on a ghost who specialized in making people disappear forever. The abandoned east wing of Fort Benning stood like a monument to forgotten wars, its concrete walls scarred by decades of desert wind and institutional neglect. Built during the height of the Cold War as a fallout shelter and classified research facility, it had been officially sealed off after a structural collapse in the 1990s that killed 2 maintenance workers. Officially, it was off-limits to all personnel without specific authorization. Unofficially, it was the perfect place to dispose of problems that required permanent solutions. Emma moved through the darkened corridors at 11:47 p.m. Her military-grade night vision goggles turned the pitch-black maze into a green-tinted landscape of shadows and deadly angles. She had been here for nearly 20 minutes, setting her trap with the methodical precision of someone who had orchestrated similar scenarios dozens of times before. Pressure plates hidden under loose floorboards. Trip wires connected to military-grade flashbang grenades. A dozen different ways to kill or incapacitate anyone foolish enough to come hunting for her in this concrete tomb. But as she crouched behind a collapsed section of wall, checking her watch for the 3rd time in 2 minutes, Emma knew something was fundamentally wrong with the situation. Harrison and Rodriguez should have arrived by now, according to the timeline she had overheard. Their plan had been brutally simple: lure her here with a fake emergency message supposedly from Martinez, then stage a tragic accident in the structurally unstable building. Clean, untraceable, tragic. Instead, she heard footsteps approaching from 3 different directions simultaneously. Emma's blood chilled as she recognized the tactical formation. This wasn't a simple murder carried out by 2 corrupt officials. This was a coordinated military operation being executed by trained professionals. Through her encrypted earpiece, she could hear whispered communications between at least 6 different operators moving through the building with textbook precision. Viper 1 in position, north corridor secured. Viper 2, east stairwell clear. No contacts. Viper 3, basement access point confirmed. Clear. These weren't instructors playing at being soldiers. These were real operators, special forces professionals with combat experience and advanced training. Emma pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the pieces of a much larger puzzle fell into place with terrifying clarity. The merchandise that Harrison and Rodriguez had discussed wasn't classified information or stolen military technology. It was people. Specifically, it was her. Somehow, someone with significant resources and intelligence capabilities had figured out that a Ghost Protocol operative was embedded at Special Weapons Division, and they had set an elaborate trap that went far beyond the capabilities of 2 corrupt officials. "Target should be in the central chamber based on our intelligence," came Rodriguez's voice through her intercepted communications. "Remember, we need her alive and functional. The buyers want to know everything she knows about Ghost Protocol operations before we dispose of her." Emma's jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. Ghost Protocol's existence was the most closely guarded secret in the American military establishment. If foreign intelligence agencies had discovered the identity of one of their operatives, they wouldn't simply kill her quickly. They would torture every piece of classified intelligence out of her first. The locations of safe houses, the identities of other operatives, the details of ongoing missions around the globe. Thousands of American lives hung in the balance, and she was the key that could unlock all of it. She had to escape this trap immediately and get word to her handlers. Every second she remained here increased the danger to her fellow operatives. Emma began moving toward the south exit, the one route that appeared clear of hostile forces according to her surveillance. But as she rounded a corner with practiced stealth, she found herself face to face with Sergeant Major Blackwell. Except this wasn't the arrogant bully who had been tormenting her for weeks. Blackwell held a military-grade assault rifle with the easy familiarity of someone who had used similar weapons in actual combat situations. His expensive watch, the one that had seemed out of place for a soldier's budget, suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't purchased with Daddy's money, it was payment for services rendered to foreign handlers. The Division Star Soldier was a foreign intelligence asset, probably embedded for years. "Hello, Emma," Blackwell said softly, his weapon trained on her center mass with professional competence. Or should I say Lieutenant Reynolds of Ghost Protocol. Emma kept her hands clearly visible, her posture non-threatening, despite every combat instinct screaming at her to strike first and ask questions later. "I don't know what you're talking about, Blackwell." Blackwell laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, only cold professionalism. The helpless little girl act was genuinely impressive. "I'll give you that much credit. You had me completely fooled for weeks. But my handlers are extremely thorough professionals. They've been tracking Ghost Protocol operations for years, waiting patiently for an opportunity exactly like this one." "Your handlers?" Emma asked, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. "Chinese Ministry of State Security," Blackwell replied with obvious pride. "I've been embedded here since I was 18 years old, building my cover identity, establishing my reputation, waiting for something truly valuable to fall into my lap." His smile was predatory and cold. "Imagine my surprise when one of America's most classified operatives walked right through the front gates of my division." Emma's mind raced through tactical options with computer-like efficiency. The corridor was narrow, giving her extremely limited room to maneuver. Blackwell was positioned perfectly with clear lines of fire and multiple escape routes if the situation deteriorated. He had been trained well by professionals who understood exactly what they were dealing with. But he was making one critical mistake. He was talking instead of shooting. "How did you figure it out?" Emma asked, taking a small step forward that would appear to be nervous fidgeting to an untrained observer. In reality, she was positioning herself for a potential strike. "Your weapons handling last week was the final piece of evidence we needed," Blackwell replied, clearly enjoying his moment of triumph. "Those mistakes you made don't exist in any standard military training manual. My handlers ran the footage through their extensive databases and got a positive match, techniques used by a Ghost Protocol operative in Syria 3 years ago." Blackwell's eyes glittered with satisfaction and barely contained excitement. An operative who was supposedly killed in action, according to all official records. Except here you are, very much alive and playing dress-up at a military division. Another step. Emma was now within striking distance, but she needed him distracted for just a few more seconds. "So, what's the plan now?" she asked. "Torture you for classified information, eventually." "Yes," Blackwell admitted with disturbing casualness. "But first, we're going to have some fun. You see, I've been taking orders and abuse from instructors and fellow soldiers for 4 long years, building my cover identity. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been pretending to be some spoiled American military brat?" Blackwell's voice carried genuine anger now, the first real emotion he had displayed. "I think it's time for some well-deserved payback before we get down to serious business." He gestured with his rifle toward a side chamber that Emma knew would be perfect for an interrogation. "Move slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." Emma nodded meekly and began to turn as instructed. Then exploded into motion with blindingly devastating speed. Her left hand swept upward to deflect the rifle barrel while her right hand drove toward Blackwell's throat in a strike designed to crush his windpipe. But Blackwell was faster and better trained than she had anticipated. Professionals who knew exactly what Ghost Protocol operatives were capable of had prepared him for this exact scenario. He twisted away from her strike with fluid grace and brought the rifle but around toward her head in a counterattack that would have killed a normal person. Emma ducked under the blow and drove her knee toward his solar plexus, but Blackwell caught her leg and used her own momentum to slam her against the concrete wall with bone-jarring force. Stars exploded across her vision as her head connected with the rough surface, and she tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. "Not bad at all," Blackwell panted, pressing the rifle barrel against her neck with enough pressure to restrict her breathing. "But I've been training specifically to fight Ghost Protocol operatives for 2 years. My handlers showed me hours of footage demonstrating your techniques, your preferred strikes, your tactical weaknesses." Emma tasted more blood where she had bitten through her tongue, but she managed to speak. "Weaknesses? You're too small, too light for sustained combat," Blackwell explained with clinical detachment. "In a straight fight against someone with equal training but superior size, you lose every single time. The only reason Ghost Protocol operatives are effective is surprise and superior equipment. Take those advantages away, and you're just another soldier." Emma met his eyes and smiled, blood staining her teeth red in a grin that would have terrified anyone with sense. "You're absolutely right about one thing, Blackwell," she said conversationally. "In a straight fight, I would lose eventually." Blackwell frowned, sensing something wrong in her tone and body language. "Good thing I never fight fair," Emma added. The explosion came from the pressure plate Emma had triggered when she stepped into the corridor, not the one under her feet, but the one she had positioned exactly 3 steps behind Blackwell's current position, timed to detonate precisely 90 seconds after activation. The blast wasn't designed to kill, just to disorient and create the chaos she needed to turn the tables. Blackwell spun toward the sound, his professional training taking over, and Emma struck with lethal precision. Her hand found the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, a pressure point that would paralyze his right arm for several minutes. As his rifle clattered to the floor, Emma's other hand drove into his kidney with surgical accuracy. Blackwell dropped to his knees, gasping in pain and shock as Emma retrieved his weapon and checked the chamber, fully loaded with military-grade ammunition. Definitely not standard division equipment. "You made another critical mistake," Emma said conversationally, keeping the rifle trained on Blackwell as he struggled to breathe. "You assumed I was here alone." Blackwell looked up at her with confusion and growing fear clouding his features. "Ghost Protocol never operates solo on foreign soil," Emma continued, her smile cold as winter death. "My partner has been watching this entire time, feeding me intelligence through encrypted channels. He's the one who told me about the pressure plate timing. He's also the one currently eliminating your backup team." As if summoned by her words, the sound of gunfire echoed through the abandoned building. Short, controlled bursts followed by ominous silence. Professional work executed with mechanical precision. "You see, Blackwell," Emma continued, "the Chinese aren't the only ones who've been planning this operation for years. We've known about the security leaks at Special Weapons Division for months. My mission was never just to identify the traitors. It was to roll up the entire enemy network." Blackwell tried to speak but only managed a strangled whisper. "Don't worry," Emma said, kneeling down beside him with false sympathy. "You'll live long enough to tell us everything you know about your handlers, their names, their locations, their other embedded assets." Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because here's something you should understand about Ghost Protocol operatives, Blackwell. We don't just kill people. We make them disappear so completely that their own mothers forget they ever existed." The gunfire had stopped completely. In the distance, Emma could hear footsteps approaching, measured, professional, familiar. "And sometimes," she added with genuine warmth, "we make them wish they'd never been born." Blackwell's eyes widened in absolute terror as he finally understood what he had stumbled into. He hadn't captured a Ghost Protocol operative who was operating alone and vulnerable. He had walked directly into a Ghost Protocol trap that had been months in the making. The final weapons assessment of the semester was specifically designed to break trainees both mentally and physically. Operation Bullseye was a weapons assembly scenario that had never been completed successfully in the division's 15-year history. Despite attempts by some of the most promising military minds in the country, the mission parameters appeared simple in concept but were absolutely impossible in execution. Assemble a Barrett M8201. 50 caliber sniper rifle blindfolded, then successfully hit 3 targets at varying distances, all within 15 minutes. No trainee had ever even completed the assembly phase, let alone attempted the shooting portion. Emma stood with her 5-person team in the pre-assessment briefing room, studying the disassembled Barrett with the same defeated expression she had maintained for months. The weapon was a nightmare of precision engineering, a complex system of springs, pins, and components that required expert knowledge and hundreds of hours of practice to master under normal conditions. To do it blindfolded seemed like madness. "This is complete suicide," whispered Private James Wilson, a nervous trainee from California whose father was a decorated Navy SEAL. "Look at the firing pin assembly alone. 1 millimeter off and the whole thing jams." "The division record is 20 minutes for assembly with full vision," added Specialist Sarah Lee, a tactical prodigy whose analytical mind had earned her top marks in every weapons course. "Most teams don't even get the barrel attached before time runs out." Emma nodded along with their concerns, maintaining her carefully constructed facade of anxious incompetence. Over the past month, since the incident in the East Wing that had resulted in several mysterious transfers and accidents, she had been even more careful about maintaining her cover identity. The official story was that Sergeant Major Blackwell had suffered a severe psychological breakdown during an unauthorized night exercise and was now recovering in a classified military psychiatric facility. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had been quietly transferred to another posting without explanation. Colonel Harrison remained in command, but Emma could feel his eyes constantly searching for any sign that she was more than she appeared to be. "Reynolds, you'll take point position," announced team leader Captain Jackson, a square-jawed officer whose grandfather was a Medal of Honor recipient. The assignment was clearly meant as an insult, putting the weakest team member in the most high-pressure position. "Try not to embarrass us all in front of the evaluators." Emma ducked her head submissively, playing her role perfectly. "I'll do my best, sir." The observation deck above the weapons range was packed with instructors, division officials, and visiting dignitaries whose presence suggested this was far more than a routine training exercise. Emma spotted Colonel Harrison among them, along with several Pentagon officials whose security clearances were high enough to observe classified training scenarios. In the front row sat a woman Emma didn't recognize, mid-50s, silver hair, wearing a civilian suit that probably cost more than most trainees' annual pay combined. Her bearing and the deference shown to her by others suggested someone with significant authority in the intelligence community. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the assessment controller, "Operation Bullseye will commence in 60 seconds. All safety protocols are active. Trainee Reynolds will attempt the blindfolded assembly first." Emma's team took their assigned positions around the weapons bench. The Barrett's components were laid out with military precision, each piece gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. The weapon was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to deliver death from over a mile away with pinpoint accuracy. Every component had to fit perfectly, every tolerance had to be exact, or the entire system would fail catastrophically, potentially injuring the user. "Remember the plan," Jackson whispered to the other team members. "We all know Reynolds will fail within minutes. Once she does, Park takes over, followed by Wilson if needed. We need at least one successful assembly to pass this module." Emma almost smiled despite herself. They were using her as the sacrificial lamb, expecting her to fail spectacularly while the real soldiers executed the actual mission. It was tactically sound, if morally questionable. It was also exactly what she needed to demonstrate her true capabilities. "Assessment commences now," announced the controller. A division instructor approached with a black blindfold. Emma submitted to having her eyes covered, her hands already trembling visibly for the benefit of observers. She heard snickers from her teammates and whispered bets about how quickly she would fail. "Your time starts now," the instructor announced, stepping back. Emma stood motionless for 5 long seconds, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. In the observation deck, she knew they were watching with anticipation, expecting her to fumble blindly at the components like every trainee before her. Instead, Emma did something that made the entire room fall into stunned silence. She smiled with genuine pleasure. Then she moved like the weapon itself had become an extension of her body. Emma's hands flew over the components with absolute precision, locating each piece without hesitation. Her fingers found the barrel first, identifying it by weight and texture. She set it in position, then reached unerringly for the receiver assembly. Each pin, spring, and component found its place with mechanical perfection. Her movements weren't just fast, they were beautiful to watch, an artist creating a masterpiece without the benefit of sight. "What the hell?" Jackson's voice was a shocked whisper as Emma continued the assembly with fluid grace. She worked from muscle memory that went far beyond what any trainee should possess. The lower receiver clicked into place. The bolt carrier group slid home with perfect alignment. The buffer spring compressed exactly as designed. She installed the firing mechanism with such delicacy and precision that the clicks of each tiny component locking into position echoed through the suddenly silent room. "That's not humanly possible," someone whispered in the observation deck. When Emma reached for the scope mount, her hands didn't hesitate or search, they went directly to the exact location where it lay, as if she could see through the blindfold. She secured it with practiced fingers, tightening each screw to precisely the right tension without the aid of tools. "Reynolds, what are you doing?" Jackson's voice was panicked now, his carefully planned assessment falling apart. "That's not the way we practiced." Emma ignored him completely. She was no longer following their amateur techniques developed by trainees playing at being soldiers. She was assembling with the skills of a professional weapons specialist who had done this hundreds of times under far more stressful conditions, in the pitch black of night, in sandstorms, under enemy fire. 3 minutes and 42 seconds after she began, Emma lifted the fully assembled Barrett M8201, checked the chamber blindfolded, and announced, "Weapon assembled. Ready for firing assessment." The room was so quiet you could hear the electronic hum of the fluorescent lights. The controller's voice, when it finally came, was thick with disbelief. Please remove your blindfold for inspection." Emma pulled off the blindfold and blinked in the harsh light. The Barrett in her hands was assembled perfectly, every component aligned, every pin secured, every tolerance exact. The weapon wasn't just functional, it was assembled with the kind of precision that weapons engineers would approve. Colonel Harrison stepped forward from the observation deck, his face unreadable as he personally inspected the rifle. After a thorough examination, he looked at Emma with an expression that mixed suspicion and something that might have been respect. "The weapon appears to be correctly assembled," he announced. "Proceed to the firing portion." Emma moved to the shooting position with calm confidence that was completely at odds with her usual demeanor. The targets were set at 400, 800, and 1,200 meters, challenging distances even for experienced snipers. She loaded the massive .50 caliber rounds with practiced ease, settled into position, and adjusted the scope with small, precise movements. 3 targets, 3 shots, the controller announced. "Beginning now." Emma took a deep breath, let half of it out, and gently squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, its massive recoil absorbed perfectly by her small frame, a technique that took years to master. Before anyone could react, she had already reacquired her sight picture and fired again. Then a third time in rapid succession. When the range officer checked the targets, his report came back with stunned disbelief: 3 hits. All center mass. The silence in the room was absolute. Emma Reynolds, the division's biggest failure, had just accomplished something that seasoned Special Forces operators would find challenging. In the observation deck, the woman in the expensive suit leaned forward and spoke quietly to Colonel Harrison. "Colonel, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about Private Reynolds." Harrison nodded slowly, his face grim with the weight of terrible knowledge. "Yes, ma'am. I believe we do." Emma looked up at the observation deck and gave a small, innocent wave that fooled absolutely no one who mattered. The helpless little girl was gone forever, replaced by something far more dangerous. The mask had finally slipped completely, and there was no putting it back on. The real game was about to begin, and Emma Reynolds was ready to play for keeps. The silence in Colonel Harrison's office was suffocating, thick with tension that seemed to press against the walls like a living thing. Emma sat in the leather chair across from his desk, her hands folded neatly in her lap, maintaining the posture of a confused trainee who had absolutely no idea why she had been summoned for this private meeting. But the atmosphere in the room was electric, crackling between them like a live wire carrying enough voltage to kill. Harrison hadn't spoken for 3 full minutes. He simply stared at her with the intensity of a predator studying prey, his weathered face a mask of barely controlled emotion. On his desk lay a thick manila folder marked with classification stamps that Emma recognized, the kind that meant people disappeared for even knowing such documents existed. Finally, Harrison reached for a remote control and activated the wall-mounted display. The screen flickered to life, showing crystal-clear footage from yesterday's assessment chamber. Emma watched herself assemble the Barrett blindfolded, her movements betraying years of specialized training that no ordinary soldier could possess. 3 minutes and 42 seconds, Harrison said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what the previous record was, Private Reynolds?" Emma kept her voice steady and innocent. "No, sir." 18 minutes, set by a team of Delta Force operators during a demonstration 3 years ago. Experienced operators with multiple combat deployments and decades of combined training. They used the exact same techniques you employed yesterday. Identical movements down to the smallest details. "I got lucky, sir." "Adrenaline, I guess." Harrison's laugh was bitter and completely devoid of humor. "Adrenaline? Yes, that must be it." He clicked to another video file with deliberate precision. "This is surveillance footage from the East Wing taken the night Sergeant Major Blackwell had his accident." Emma's blood chilled, but she kept her expression perfectly neutral. The footage was grainy, shot through night vision cameras, but it clearly showed a figure moving through the abandoned building with grace that defied human limitations. The timestamp showed it was recorded 20 minutes before the official incident report. Interesting thing about this footage, Harrison continued with the patience of a chess master setting up checkmate. It was automatically deleted by the security system the next morning. Routine purge according to the computer logs, except I had a backup copy made. His eyes bored into Emma's with laser intensity. "The figure in this video moves exactly like you did in yesterday's assessment." Emma said nothing. There was literally nothing she could say that wouldn't make the situation exponentially worse. Harrison stood and walked to his window, gazing out at the division grounds where trainees were running their morning physical training, completely unaware of the deadly conversation taking place above them. "I've been in the military for 32 years, Reynolds. I've seen things that would give most people nightmares for the rest of their lives. I've worked alongside special forces, intelligence operatives, black operations specialists." He turned back to face her with the slow deliberation of a man who had made a terrible decision. "I know what real killers look like." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma calculated her options with computer-like precision. The distance to the door, the weapons within reach, the probability of fighting her way out of the building without killing innocent people. All scenarios ended badly for everyone involved. "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Stop." Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. "Just stop with the act. We both know exactly what you are. The only question that matters now is why you're here." Emma met his gaze steadily, her training screaming at her to maintain cover at all costs. "I'm here to learn, sir. To serve my country." Harrison returned to his desk and opened the manila folder with surgical precision. Emma Reynolds, age 24, from Portland, Oregon. Father deceased. Mother works as a nurse. Graduated high school with average grades, no military experience, accepted to Special Weapons Division on a diversity scholarship that nobody can explain. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. It showed a young girl, maybe 8 years old, with Emma's face, but different eyes, softer, more innocent, unmarked by violence. This is the real Emma Reynolds. She died in a car accident 6 months ago along with her parents. Tragic story. Harrison's voice carried genuine sadness. Except somehow she managed to apply to this division 3 months after her death. Emma stared at the photograph, her mind racing through contingency plans. Ghost Protocol's forgers were the best in the world, but apparently not perfect enough to fool a determined investigation. So, who are you really? Harrison leaned forward with the intensity of an interrogator. CIA? NSA? Some new black operations program I haven't heard of? Emma remained silent, her training absolute. Harrison sighed and pulled out another file, this one even more heavily classified. After yesterday's assessment, I made some very careful calls, reached out to contacts in the intelligence community, asked some extremely discreet questions about unusual training programs. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. One name kept coming up. A program so classified that most people in the government think it's a myth. Emma's heart stopped beating for a full second. Ghost Protocol. The words seemed to echo in the small office like a gunshot. Harrison watched Emma's face with microscopic attention, looking for any reaction that would confirm his suspicions. She gave him absolutely nothing. Officially, Ghost Protocol doesn't exist, Harrison continued with the relentless logic of a prosecutor building a case. No budget line items, no personnel records, no operational reports anywhere in the system. But unofficially, it's rumored to be the most elite special operations unit in the world. Operatives trained from childhood, given resources and authority that would make the president nervous. He stood again, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. The stories are incredible, if you believe them. Ghost Protocol operatives who can infiltrate any facility, eliminate any target, disappear without a trace. Ghosts who serve America's interests in ways that can never be officially acknowledged. Emma's training screamed at her to maintain cover, to deny everything, to play the confused trainee until the very end. But something in Harrison's voice made her pause, something that sounded almost like respect rather than accusation. The woman in the observation deck yesterday, Emma said quietly, speaking for the first time without her cover persona. Who is she? Harrison's eyes widened slightly. It was the first time Emma had acknowledged knowing more than she should. Deputy Director Sarah Vance, Defense Intelligence Agency. She's been tracking unusual activities at military divisions across the country for the past year. Security breaches, personnel disappearances, training accidents that don't quite add up. Harrison sat back down heavily. She thinks there's a coordinated effort to compromise our military training system. Emma processed this information with professional detachment. And you think I'm part of that effort? No. Harrison's answer was immediate and certain. I think you're here to stop it. The admission hung between them like a bridge that neither was sure they should cross. The night Blackwell was injured, Harrison continued carefully, 3 other trainees disappeared from the division. Officially, they transferred to other units for personal reasons. Unofficially, they vanished without a trace. No forwarding addresses, no contact with family members, no digital footprints. Emma's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She had known about Blackwell and Rodriguez, but not about other missing trainees. Then there are the financial irregularities, Harrison continued, opening his desk drawer. Equipment purchases that don't match inventory records. Communication systems with capabilities far beyond what a training division needs. Training scenarios that seem designed to identify and recruit specific types of soldiers. He pulled out a small device, a listening bug, the exact same type Emma had planted weeks ago. I found this in my office yesterday morning. Military-grade surveillance equipment, the kind that costs more than most people's cars. He set it on the desk between them like evidence in a trial. The interesting thing is, it wasn't transmitting to any foreign intelligence service. It was sending data to a server farm in Virginia that officially doesn't exist. Emma stared at the device, her mind reeling, her own surveillance equipment turned against her. So, here's what I think happened, Harrison said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who had solved a complex puzzle. Ghost Protocol discovered that Special Weapons Division was compromised by foreign intelligence. They needed someone on the inside, someone who could investigate without raising suspicion. So they sent their best operative, gave her a perfect cover identity, and let her play the part of a failing trainee while she gathered intelligence. Emma said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. The question is, Harrison continued, what happens now? Because Deputy Director Vance is extremely interested in meeting with you, and I suspect your handlers are equally interested in extracting you before that meeting can happen. Emma finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you want, Colonel? Harrison smiled for the first time since she had entered his office. I want to help, because whatever conspiracy you've uncovered, whatever threat you're here to neutralize, it's bigger than just selling secrets to foreign governments. It's about something that threatens the very foundation of our military. Harrison walked to a wall safe Emma hadn't noticed before. Inside were files, photographs, and what appeared to be financial records that painted a picture of systematic corruption. I've been investigating the irregularities for months, but I'm just one man with limited resources and authority. Harrison turned back to face her. You, on the other hand, have the backing of the most powerful intelligence organization in the world. He returned to his desk with the evidence. I think it's time we pooled our resources and ended this threat permanently. Emma studied his face with the intensity of someone whose life depended on reading people correctly. Her training told her this could be an elaborate trap, a sophisticated setup designed to expose her mission and compromise Ghost Protocol. But her instincts, honed by years of reading people in life-or-death situations, told her something different. Colonel Harrison was telling the truth. If I were hypothetically part of such an organization, Emma said carefully, what would you want in return for your cooperation? Justice, Harrison replied immediately. For the trainees who've disappeared, for the secrets that have been sold, for the trust that's been betrayed. I want the people responsible to pay for what they've done. Emma nodded slowly. And if that justice came in a form that could never be officially acknowledged? Harrison's smile was grim and determined. Then I suppose I'd have to live with the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the good guys win. Emma made her decision with the cold calculation that had kept her alive through dozens of missions. Colonel, she said, dropping her cover accent completely, I think we need to have a very different kind of conversation. Yes, Harrison agreed with obvious relief. I believe we do. Outside the office window, the division continued its daily routine, completely unaware that the balance of power had just shifted dramatically. The hunter had found an unexpected ally, and the hunted were about to discover that their prey had developed very sharp teeth. The real war was about to begin, and Emma Reynolds was ready to show everyone what Ghost Protocol operatives were truly capable of when the gloves came off. The secure conference room in the division's basement had been swept for surveillance devices 3 times in the past hour by military technicians with the highest security clearances. Colonel Harrison sat across from Emma while Deputy Director Sarah Vance observed from the head of the table with the intensity of someone evaluating a potentially explosive situation. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across their faces, giving the meeting the atmosphere of a war council planning for a decisive battle. Emma had abandoned her trainee uniform for civilian clothes, dark jeans, a black sweater, and boots that looked ordinary but contained enough hidden weapons to outfit a small strike team. Without the baggy military fatigues, her true physique was visible, lean muscle, perfect posture, and the kind of controlled stillness that marked a professional operator. Let's start with the basics, Vance said, her voice crisp and authoritative. Your real name, rank, and operational designation. Emma met her gaze steadily. Lieutenant Emma Reynolds, Ghost Protocol, operational designation Shadow 9. Vance nodded as if this confirmed intelligence she had already suspected. And your mission parameters? Infiltrate Special Weapons Division under deep cover. Identify and neutralize the security breach that was compromising classified military intelligence. Gather evidence of foreign infiltration and eliminate all hostile assets permanently. Eliminate, Harrison repeated quietly. Not capture, not arrest. Eliminate. Emma's expression didn't change by even a fraction. Ghost Protocol doesn't take prisoners, Colonel. We solve problems permanently. Vance leaned forward with professional interest. How many problems have you solved since arriving at Fort Benning? Sergeant Major Blackwell was the primary target, Chinese Ministry of State Security operative embedded for 4 years. He's currently in a black site facility undergoing enhanced interrogation. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing routine paperwork. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was a secondary asset recruited through financial pressure. He suffered a fatal training accident 2 weeks ago. Harrison's face went pale. Rodriguez is dead? Officially, he was killed in a climbing accident during a solo training exercise. His body was recovered from the bottom of Devil's Canyon with injuries consistent with a fall. Emma pulled out a tablet and showed them photographs that made both officials look away. Unofficially, he was terminated after providing intelligence about the broader conspiracy. The images showed Rodriguez's broken body at the base of a cliff, but Emma's clinical description made it clear this was no accident. Jesus Christ, Harrison whispered. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about national security, Emma replied with ice-cold professionalism. Rodriguez was selling the identities of undercover intelligence operatives to foreign governments. 3 CIA assets in Eastern Europe were killed because of information he provided. A Navy SEAL team in Syria was ambushed because he leaked their operational plans. Her eyes blazed with controlled fury. How many American lives is his worth, Colonel? Vance held up a hand before Harrison could respond. What about the other missing trainees? Emma's expression darkened considerably. That's where things become complicated. Blackwell and Rodriguez were foot soldiers in a much larger operation. The real conspiracy involves something called Project Artemis. She activated the room's holographic display showing a complex organizational chart with dozens of names and connections that painted a picture of systematic infiltration. Project Artemis is a long-term infiltration program run jointly by Chinese and Russian intelligence services. The goal is to place assets in key positions throughout the American military and intelligence communities, not just spies, but actual sleeper agents who will spend decades building their covers before activation. The chart showed connections between military divisions, defense contractors, and government agencies across the entire country. Special Weapons Division was chosen as a primary recruitment center because of its elite status. Graduates go on to command positions in every branch of the military. If you can compromise them during their formative years, you own them for life. Harrison studied the chart with growing horror. How many divisions are compromised? 17 that we know of, possibly more. Emma highlighted several nodes on the display. The missing trainees weren't kidnapped. They were recruited, offered money, blackmail material on their families, or ideological conversion. Some volunteered willingly. Vance's jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. Where are they now? Dead, mostly. Once they provided the intelligence their handlers needed, they became liabilities that had to be eliminated. A few were relocated to China or Russia with new identities. But most were killed to prevent exposure. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just espionage. It was systematic infiltration on a scale that threatened the entire military structure of the United States. How long has this been going on? Harrison asked. Project Artemis began 15 years ago, shortly after Special Weapons Division was founded. The timing wasn't coincidental. Emma brought up architectural plans of the division. The division was specifically designed to be compromised from the very beginning. She highlighted specific areas of the building. Look at the communication systems, the computer networks, the security protocols. Everything was built with back doors that allow external access. The implications were staggering. The server room you thought was secure? It's been transmitting copies of every file to Beijing since day one. The psychological evaluation protocols used to screen trainees? They're designed to identify potential assets and vulnerabilities. Even the curriculum has been modified to normalize certain types of moral flexibility. Vance leaned back in her chair, her face grim. You're telling me that Special Weapons Division is essentially a foreign intelligence operation disguised as an American military school? Not just Special Weapons Division. The entire network of elite military training facilities has been compromised to varying degrees. We're looking at the systematic corruption of America's future military leadership. Harrison stood and began pacing like a caged animal. This is impossible. The oversight, the inspections, the background checks. How could something this massive go undetected for 15 years? Emma's smile was cold as Arctic wind. Because the people doing the oversight are part of the conspiracy. The organizational chart expanded to show connections reaching into the highest levels of the Pentagon and intelligence community. General William Blackwell, Sergeant Major Blackwell's father. His position on the Joint Chiefs has been feeding information to Chinese handlers for years in exchange for his son's advancement. Admiral James Peterson, Staff Sergeant Peterson's father. He's been providing classified naval intelligence while using his influence to place compromised officers on key vessels. Lieutenant General Mitchell. His Pentagon connections have given the conspiracy access to procurement contracts worth billions. The beauty of Project Artemis is its scope, Emma continued. It's not just about stealing secrets. It's about shaping policy, influencing decisions, and gradually steering American military doctrine in directions that benefit our enemies. Vance was studying the chart with the intensity of someone trying to memorize every detail. How did Ghost Protocol discover this? We didn't, initially. We were investigating a series of seemingly unrelated security breaches across multiple agencies. It took 3 years of analysis to identify the pattern and trace it back to the military training system. Emma pulled up another file. The breakthrough came when we realized that every compromised operation had at least one participant who was a graduate of an elite military division. She showed them a timeline of intelligence failures over the past decade, each one connected to division graduates in key positions. Once we identified the pattern, we began placing operatives in divisions to investigate from the inside. I'm the 7th agent assigned to Special Weapons Division. The previous 6 were all discovered and eliminated. Harrison stopped pacing. Eliminated how? Training accidents mostly. 1 suicide, 2 car crashes, 1 drowning during a water exercise. All very convincing. All completely untraceable. Emma's voice carried a note of professional respect for her enemy's competence. Whoever is running this operation knows how to clean up loose ends. But you survived, Vance observed. Because I changed the rules of engagement. Instead of trying to maintain perfect cover while investigating, I let them discover me, but only partially. They knew I was more than I appeared, but they didn't know exactly how much more. That gave me the tactical advantage I needed to turn the tables. Emma brought up surveillance footage from the East Wing confrontation. When they tried to eliminate me, I was ready. I used their own trap against them, captured Blackwell alive, and extracted the intelligence I needed to map the entire network. The footage showed Emma moving through the abandoned building like a predator, systematically eliminating the team sent to kill her. The interrogation of Sergeant Major Blackwell provided the final pieces of the puzzle: names, locations, operational procedures, financial networks, everything we needed to roll up the entire conspiracy. Vance leaned forward. So, what's the plan? Mass arrests? Public exposure? Emma shook her head. Public exposure would cause a panic and potentially compromise other ongoing operations. Mass arrests would alert the foreign handlers and allow them to activate sleeper agents we haven't identified yet. She brought up a new display showing a complex operational timeline. Ghost Protocol prefers a more surgical approach. Over the next 6 months, every compromised individual will suffer an unfortunate accident. Car crashes, heart attacks, training mishaps, suicides brought on by personal problems. Nothing that can be traced back to us. Nothing that will alert the enemy network. Harrison stared at her in horror. You're talking about assassinating dozens of people, American citizens, military officers. I'm talking about removing traitors who have sold out their country for money. Emma's voice was ice cold. These people have caused the deaths of American soldiers, compromised national security, and betrayed everything they swore to protect. They deserve no mercy. But the legal system can't handle this, Vance interrupted. The evidence is largely classified. The scope is too large for conventional prosecution, and the damage to public confidence would be catastrophic. Sometimes justice has to be served in the shadows. Emma nodded. Ghost protocol exists precisely for situations like this, when the normal rules don't apply, when the stakes are too high for conventional solutions. We do what needs to be done. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the division grounds where trainees were going about their daily routines, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. The question is whether you can live with that knowledge, Colonel, because once you know what we're going to do, you become part of it. There's no going back. Harrison looked at the organizational chart, at the names of people he had known and trusted for years, at the evidence of betrayal that ran deeper than he had ever imagined. Finally, he spoke with quiet determination. "What do you need from me?" Emma smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, it reached her eyes. "Just keep being the honorable soldier you've always been, Colonel. Leave the rest to the ghosts." Outside, the sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky the color of blood. Soon, the real hunting would begin. 6 months later, Emma Reynolds stood at attention in the division's main auditorium, wearing the crisp dress uniform of a Special Weapons Division honor graduate. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the hunched, defeated posture of the woman who had arrived 9 months earlier. In her place stood a confident soldier whose bearing commanded respect from everyone in the room. The auditorium was packed with trainees, instructors, and distinguished guests for the graduation ceremony. On the stage, Colonel Harrison prepared to deliver his final address to the graduating class. But this wasn't the same man who had run the division for the past 5 years. The events of the previous months had aged him, carved new lines around his eyes, and given his voice a gravity that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "today we celebrate not just the graduation of another class of exceptional trainees, but the rebirth of everything this division represents." In the audience, Emma spotted familiar faces. Private Martinez, now her closest friend at the division, sat in the front row with tears of pride in her eyes. Deputy Director Vance occupied a place of honor among the distinguished guests, her presence a reminder of how much had changed. And scattered throughout the crowd were new faces, replacement instructors, visiting officials, and trainees who had transferred in to fill the gaps left by those who had mysteriously departed. The departures had been subtle, spread out over months to avoid suspicion. Staff Sergeant Peterson had been killed in a car accident during Christmas break, a tragic collision with a drunk driver who himself died in the crash. Corporal Mitchell had committed suicide, apparently overwhelmed by academic pressure and family expectations. General Blackwell had died in a helicopter crash during a routine inspection flight, mechanical failure, according to the investigation. Admiral Peterson had suffered a heart attack in his Pentagon office, brought on by a rare toxin that mimicked the effects of cardiac stress. The beauty of Ghost Protocol's work was its invisibility. To the outside world, these were simply tragic coincidences, the kind of random misfortunes that befell even the most powerful people. Only a handful of individuals knew the truth, that America's most elite operatives had systematically dismantled a foreign intelligence network that had taken 15 years to build. "This year has tested us in ways we never expected," Harrison continued. "We have faced challenges that forced us to examine our values, our loyalties, and our commitment to the principles that define American military service." Emma's mind drifted to the night 3 months ago when the last of the conspirators had been eliminated. Deputy Secretary Wagner had been found dead in his study, an apparent suicide brought on by a corruption scandal that had mysteriously come to light. The man who had been Project Artemis's American controller for over a decade was gone, along with his entire network of traitors and foreign assets. "But from these challenges, we've emerged stronger," Harrison said, his eyes finding Emma in the crowd. "We have learned that true strength comes not from the absence of adversity, but from how we respond when our principles are tested." The ceremony continued with the presentation of awards and honors. Emma watched as her former tormentors, those who had survived the purge, received their commissions and assignments. Their attitudes toward her had changed dramatically once her true capabilities became known. The mockery had been replaced by a mixture of respect and fear that followed her wherever she went. Private Wilson, who had once whispered about her failures, now sought her advice on tactical problems. Specialist Lee, the analytical prodigy, had become one of Emma's most devoted admirers after witnessing her strategic thinking in advanced weapons simulations. Even Captain Jackson, the former team leader who had used her as bait, now deferred to her judgment in combat exercises. The graduating class of Special Weapons Division represents the future of American military excellence, Harrison announced. These young men and women will carry forward the values of honor, courage, and integrity that define our armed forces. Emma almost smiled at the irony. The division that had been designed to corrupt America's future leaders was now producing some of the most dedicated and principled officers in the military. The removal of foreign influence had allowed the institution to fulfill its true purpose. Before we conclude today's ceremony, Harrison said, I want to recognize one trainee whose journey exemplifies the transformation we have all undergone. Private Emma Reynolds, please step forward. Emma felt every eye in the auditorium turn toward her as she made her way to the stage. The whispers followed her, stories that had grown in the telling, legends that painted her as everything from a prodigy to a ghost. The truth, as always, was more complex than the myths. Private Reynolds arrived at this division as an unknown quantity, Harrison said as Emma took her place beside him. She faced adversity, overcame challenges, and ultimately proved that true strength cannot be measured by conventional standards. He turned to face her directly. Emma, your time at Special Weapons has been extraordinary. You have shown us that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on distant battlefields but within ourselves, by those who refuse to surrender their principles no matter the cost. Emma met his gaze, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. This was as close as he could come to acknowledging what had really happened, the role she had played in saving the division from foreign control. It is my honor to present you with the Division Medal of Excellence, awarded to trainees who demonstrate exceptional service to their country and their fellow soldiers. As Harrison pinned the medal to her uniform, Emma felt a strange sense of completion. The mission was over. The conspiracy had been destroyed. The division was safe. But more than that, she had found something she hadn't expected when she first arrived, a sense of belonging. Thank you, sir, Emma said quietly, her voice carrying just enough emotion to seem genuine without revealing too much. The ceremony concluded with the traditional oath of service, hundreds of voices joining together in the promise to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Emma spoke the words along with her classmates, but for her, they carried a different weight. She had already fulfilled that oath in ways they could never imagine. As the trainees filed out of the auditorium, Martinez caught up with Emma in the corridor. I can't believe it's over, Martinez said, her eyes bright with excitement about her upcoming assignment to Fort Bragg. It feels like just yesterday you were getting beaten up by Blackwell. Emma smiled, remembering the woman who had arrived at Special Weapons Division 9 months ago. That feels like a lifetime ago. You know, I never did figure out what happened to Blackwell, Martinez continued. One day he was here, the next day he was gone. Same with Rodriguez and some of the others. It's like they just disappeared. People leave for all kinds of reasons, Emma said carefully. Sometimes it's better not to ask too many questions. Martinez studied her friend's face, perhaps sensing the deeper currents beneath the surface. Emma, can I ask you something? Of course. That day in the Barrett assessment, when you did what you did, that wasn't luck, was it? That wasn't adrenaline or beginner's luck or any of the explanations people gave. Emma considered her answer carefully. What do you think? I think, Martinez said slowly, that you're not who you pretend to be. I think you came here for a reason that had nothing to do with getting a military education. And I think, whatever that reason was, it was important enough that people died for it. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Martinez was more perceptive than she had given her credit for. And I think, Martinez continued, that I'm okay with not knowing the details. Because whatever you did, whoever you really are, you made this place better. You made us all better. Emma felt something she rarely experienced, genuine emotion. Thank you, Martinez. That means more than you know. As they reached the exit, Emma spotted a familiar figure waiting by a black sedan in the parking lot, Agent Williams, her ghost protocol handler, dressed in an expensive suit that made him look like any other government official. It was time to go. I have to leave, Emma told Martinez. My ride is here. Martinez followed her gaze to the sedan with government plates. Let me guess, your next assignment? Something like that. They embraced, and Emma was surprised by how difficult it was to let go. In all her years of training and operations, she had never formed genuine friendships. The mission at Special Weapons Division had changed her in ways she was still discovering. Stay safe, Emma, Martinez whispered. Whatever you do, wherever you go, remember that you have friends who care about you. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked toward the sedan, her posture straight and confident, every inch the elite soldier she had always been. As the car pulled away from Special Weapons Division, Emma looked back through the rear window. The institution that had been designed to corrupt America's future leaders was now fulfilling its true purpose, producing officers who would serve with honor and integrity. The foreign conspiracy had been destroyed, the traitors eliminated, and the threat neutralized. But more than that, Emma had learned something about herself. She was more than just a weapon, more than just a tool for eliminating threats. She was capable of friendship, of loyalty, of caring about something beyond the mission. How do you feel? Agent Williams asked from the driver's seat. Emma considered the question. Different, she said finally. Changed. Good different, or bad different? Emma smiled, thinking of Martinez's words, of Colonel Harrison's respect, of the trainees who now looked up to her as a role model rather than a target for mockery. Good different, she said. Definitely good different. The sedan disappeared into the desert, carrying Emma toward her next mission, her next identity, her next chance to serve in the shadows. But she would never forget her time at Special Weapons Division, where a woman pretending to be weak had become truly strong, where enemies had become friends, and where the most important victory had been won not through violence, but through the simple act of proving that honor and courage could triumph over corruption and betrayal. Behind them, the division continued its daily routine, unaware that it had been saved by a ghost who had learned to be human. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.